How is it going, everybody? Welcome to the Bill Austin Radio Studio. Here with you, Will Anderson, Jason Teeter, Jack Kemmler, bottom of the sixth. Let's get it started with some UFC.
So we have 308 this weekend. Big card coming out of Abu Dhabi. It is going to be an early start time. You better set your alarms because we have a 7 a.m. start for the prelims. And honestly, these prelims are stacked just as much as the main card. If we go down to the prelims, Chris Barnett comes in on short notice to fight Kennedy, and Taffa pulls out. Big deal because he just had this fight. It was a big fight, and Barnett was supposed to fight last weekend in the fight night, right? It's going to be a good fight. More that are good on the under. Bruno Silva's fighting again. Good to see him out. Carlos Lay, great out there. Bruno Ferreira, both Brunos could come up and upset. And now let's go right to the main card because there's a lot to talk about, right? A lot of guys who, one, haven't fought in a while, and then you have the big fight at the top of the card. So let's start off with the bottom of it. We got Magomedov versus Arman. Magomedov can only fight, has not been able to fight in the U.S., so it's great to see him out in the Abu Dhabi card on a main card, right? I think he's got a good chance to beat Arman. Arman's played well, but I think Magomedov has a better fight overall. Ige versus Murphy. Murphy is 14-0-1. Dan Ige is 18-8. Now, by statistics, if you look at this purely off statistics, Murphy will win this fight, right? But Ige comes in on short notice and fights Diego Lopez, right? And this is the only reason he gets this fight. He said, I want to fight Murphy. I want to beat him. Ige has more heart. If I'm a betting man, which I am, I'm going Ige just to give the heart. Stop Leon Murphy, but I could see Murphy coming out. Now we got Rakic versus Ankalaev. Ankalaev's look great, but I think a lot of people can say Rakic is going to win this. Ankalaev, he can wrestle it out, then he pulls this out, but I don't think it's going to happen. I think we got a little Rakic win, and then he maybe fights for the light heavyweight title. I don't know how that division is going to play out, but I could potentially see him winning and fighting for the title, but you might have to fight Khalil Roundtree for the rematch. It gets kind of messy because if Poatan wants to sit out for a few months, you could have a winner of this fight Khalil, and then because Khalil looked amazing, right? And they only brought him up to 7th in the rankings. He looked amazing. It was great. I don't know how that plays out, but that's a storyline to look at. And now we're going to go to our co-main, which is Khamzat versus Rob Whittaker. We haven't seen Khamzat fight in 2 years, right? Khamzat is a different fighter back then. He was not as healthy, and the reason he has pulled out of 3 fights, one of them by missing weight, others because of injury. He hasn't been able to stay healthy, and he is going against one of the baddest men in that middleweight division, Robert Whittaker. And I think Rob wipes the floor with Khamzat. The only way I see Khamzat winning is if he out-wrestles him. Khamzat has said to the media that if Rob touches him, it's dangerous, right? And so I think if Rob even gets a good shot of the chin, Khamzat's coming down, right? But this fight makes a big issue for the middleweight division because you have DDP up there with the title right now, right? People have said throughout UFC that Sean Strickland will get the next title shot. But if Rob Whittaker wins right here, this really says, does Sean get his rematch or does Rob get his rematch of DDP before Sean? It's going to be a real question if Rob wins. I don't think it's an if. I think it's a when. I love Rob, and I love this fight for him. Top of the card, finishing it out, we're going to talk about Max Holloway versus Ilia Topuria, right? This is a fight that many of us have anticipated. So I'm going to go on both sides and see why both guys could potentially win. I think Ilia could win because Max could have the BMF curse. We've seen the guys who get the BMF title. The only guy who's done it, Jorge Masvidal has done it, but that was in 2018. We have seen the BMF curse. Every guy who's gotten the belt has lost right after. And it's been sketchy, and it hasn't been happening. Ilia has looked great. He's looked fast on the bag. It will be up top. There will not be wrestling unless Max says, I need to wrestle. But I know Max, he's a bad guy. He will not go down on the ground. Now we're going to say why Max might win. Max is accurate with his shots. He goes straight to the chin. He can make stuff happen. Ilya Topuria has looked terrible when he has right head kicks coming at him. It has been ever since he started amateur to pros, now to UFC, he has had a problem with those right head kicks. If Max can incorporate that with accurate shots, I think this thing can go either way. I love Max. I'm personally going to go Max, and I think it's just going to be a great overall fight. I do not think it makes it out of the third or fourth round. It does not go the distance. Jack, you want to talk a little bit about it?
Yeah, that fight I'm loving right now. I mean, you look at Ilya Topuria, his resume actually isn't one of the greater things, especially with all the divisions. You're looking at all the champions. I mean, he did fight Volk in his last fight, but Volk, after that Islam fight, has not looked the same at all. You did not see the right Volk in that fight against Ilya. Then you got Max Holloway, who's coming off that amazing fight against Gaethje. Was easily going to win by uni decision, but ended off with that knockout.
Well, and I think a lot of people forget that is a common opponent between the two is Volkanovski. Volkanovski beat Max Holloway 3 times. And Ilya wiped the floor with Volk, which was sad to watch, and Volk has been messing. But yes, you're right. Volk has not been the same fighter. Came up on short notice on a lot of these more recent fights. Hasn't had the full camp like he did with Max. Could Volk have beat Ilya with a longer camp, more focus? We don't know, and that's a one common opponent. And can Max go up against another boxer and beat him? Well, let's go to you with the next topic.
All right, so now we got some NASCAR. Season is coming down to the wire, but man, is it heating up. Let's talk a little bit about the South Point 400 at Las Vegas Motor Speedway, the most recent race in the NASCAR Cup Series. I'm going to give you out the top 10, and then we'll talk about the race a little bit. Winner of this race was Joey Logano in the number 22, finishing second. Christopher Bell probably had the best car all day. Daniel Suarez in third, William Byron in fourth, Alex Bowman in fifth, Martin Truex Jr. in sixth, Ross Chastain seventh, Denny Hamlin 11th. Oh, excuse me, 8th. Sorry there. John Hunter Nemechek in 9th, and then Chris Buescher rounding out the top 10. And as far as the race went, it was actually a decent race. You know, there was a decent amount of passing, especially with this new next-gen car, the new next-gen era, dominated by a lot of side force and down force and all that kind of stuff. And like I mentioned earlier, Christopher Bell, the number 20 car, Joe Gibbs Racing, he absolutely dominated this race. Led 155 laps, probably had the fastest car all day, aside from Tyler Reddick in the number 45 car, who actually flipped early on in the race. Race got cut short. Christopher Bell didn't win out on strategy, was very close to getting to Joey Logano to beat him, but finished 0.662 seconds behind Joey Logano. Let's talk a little bit about the winner of this race, Joey Logano. So he won at Las Vegas. That gets him into the Final Four, the last round. That'll be held at Phoenix Raceway in just a couple of weeks. And every 4 years since 2014, this guy's been in the Final Four. So 2014, 2016, 2018. You know, the list goes on. And the last 2 times he won the opening race of the round of 8, like he did last week, he's won the championship, 2018 and 2022. So, you know, there's some, you know, magic there might be happening there with Joey Logano. But how is he even in there in the first place? Well, he won at Nashville after 5 overtimes. So before the race ends, if there is a caution and they cannot get the race restarted before it would have ended, they'll throw what's called an overtime, and you run 2 laps to see who can get to the finish. Well, in Nashville, that happened 5 separate times. So 5 times within 5 separate times within 2 laps. Cars wrecked. They had to set him back up. It was a big fuel mileage race. Joey Logano won that race, and he really wouldn't have made the playoffs otherwise. He did not have a good season this year, but snuck into the playoffs with that overtime win in Nashville. Then he won at Atlanta to make it into the round of 12, which was about a couple months ago. And then at the end of the round of 12, he didn't qualify on points. He didn't run well enough in the playoffs to get to the round of 8. Unfortunately for Alex Bowman, who was technically number 8 in the playoff standings, he was disqualified for losing 17 pounds in his race car over the course of the race, did not pass technical after the race. He ended up being disqualified, and that put Joey Logano into the round of 8. Now he's in the championship 4, got that win at Las Vegas. Seems like there's some trends pointing to him winning the championship. Let's look at really quick the playoff standings for the NASCAR Cup Series. Obviously, at the top right now is going to be Joey Logano with those most recent wins. He's doing really well. Then next we're going to go Christopher Bell, Kyle Larson, and William Byron. So if the playoffs ended right now, those would be your top 4 heading for a championship at Phoenix. And now all over 27 behind the cut line, we got the final 4, or the back half of the 8 in the round of 8. We got Denny Hamlin, Tyler Reddick, Ryan Blaney, and Chase Elliott at minus 53 points is the last one in the round of 8. Those pretty much all those guys aside Denny Hamlin need to win to get themselves locked into Phoenix. And now let's turn our focus to the Homestead Miami race, Straight Talk Wireless 400, Sunday, October 27th, 11:30 p.m. on NBC, 267 lap race. And Christopher Bell was the most recent winner, and I'm going to be honest, it looks like he's going to win again. He's been super consistent all year. He's been super fast, especially at these bigger mile-and-a-half speedway type tracks. I think this is a race that's boding really well for him. I think another guy to look out for is going to be Tyler Reddick. He's really good at running that top line like they like to run down at Homestead, and I think if either of those guys can win, they'll make a serious championship push, and I think that's about all for NASCAR. So now I'm going to throw it over to Jack doing some college basketball.
Yeah, I got a couple segments here for college basketball. We'll go top 5 team is my dark horse, and a team that's talked about highly, but I don't really like. Let's start with the top 5, go 5-1. Houston from the Big 12. I think even with the loss of Jamal Shead, they are returning 7 rotation players from last season. Of course, LJ Cryer, Emmanuel Sharp, those 2 guys, they're main guys. They're coming back. That is humongous for the team. And we know Kelvin Sampson, he has cemented himself as one of the best coaches in the nation with his style of play, emphasizing on the defense. I think in their second year in the Big 12, they're starting to get comfortable. They didn't really go that deep in the March Madness last year. They had that Sweet 16 loss to Duke. But I could see a better year out of Houston, especially with a better roster this year. A lot of continuity. Let's move over to number 4. It's Duke. This roster, I think it's unexplainable to say how good it is. They have 2 returning 5-star guards, Tyrese Proctor, Caleb Foster. They got a 5-star forward, Con Knuppel, who has caught all eyes in the preseason. He is in all the news right now. They got vital transfers, Malik Brown, Mason Gillis, Sion James, that can work in the rotation. Kaman Milok, the 5-star freshman from Africa, who could be a top 5 pick. The guy's 7 foot and shoots the 3 well. And, of course, the guy who needs no introduction, Cooper Flagg. You guys have heard about him enough. They have highly recruited guys, Isaiah Evans, Darren Harris, a 5-star and a 4-star. They may not be playing the season. They may be playing off the bench, maybe not even getting minutes. It's all up to John Shire and how he kind of manages the plethora of talent, because Duke has a lot. So moving on to the number 3 team, it's Iowa State. Iowa State is returning its whole starting lineup after going 24-8 last year. They had that heartbreaking loss in the Sweet 16 to Terrence Shannon Jr. in Illinois, but that team was really good in Big 12 play. And they were ranked number 1 in the nation on defense, according to KenPom. They were one of the better teams in the nation, and they were returning that whole starting lineup. You have to look out for Tameen Lipsey to win a lot of defensive awards. The thing about college basketball, continuity is key. This Iowa State is wreaking continuity. The number 2 team I got is Alabama. Returning Mark Sears, he averaged 21, 4 on 50%. He's my national player preseason pick of the year. Grant Nelson, they got back to. I thought he was a star. He was a star in March Madness. I thought he was a lock to go into the NBA draft. First round pick, no doubt. He stayed with Alabama and Nate Oates. They added Cliff Omori from Rutgers. He's going to help out a lot with interior defense and shot blocking. They also brought in the number 2 recruiting class, 5-stars Darion Reed, Aiden Sherrill, and along with returning stars Latrell Wrightsell and Chris Youngblood, Alabama is headlining that SEC conference. I think they'll win it pretty easily. And Nate Oates is just doing great stuff with that team right now. And number 1, of course, is Kansas. This is the best roster in college basketball by far. Of course, they have the best coach in college basketball, Bill Self. They lost Kevin McCullough and Johnny Furphy, but they returned and added some dogs. Hunter Dickinson is the favorite to win National Player of the Year currently. KJ Adams averaged 12 points per game last year. They got number 7 transfer Ryland Griffin from Bama, number 23 AJ Storr from Wisconsin, and they added 5-star freshman Flory Badunga. This Kansas team is scary looking out. 3 Big 12 teams in the top 5 right now. Let's get into my dark horse. I got Ohio State. I think with a revamped roster under Coach Diebler, that the Buckeyes will lead on veteran leadership from Bruce Thornton and key transfers like Michi Johnson, the guy from South Carolina, Sean Stewart from Duke. Last season, 22-14 finish. They had that deep run in the Big Ten tournament, including a deep NIT run. I think it gave Ohio State a lot of foundation. With a strong mix of experienced players and talented newcomers, I could see Ohio State surprising a lot of people in this kind of weak Big Ten conference we're looking at for the 2024 season. And a team that's talked about very highly that I don't really like is UConn. They're 2 back-to-back winner of the national championship. They're ranked number 3 right now in the AP poll, and I just don't see how it's a three-peat is possible for this team right now. They returned 1 player from that team last year. That was Alex Caravan, who I think was their worst starter. He's a one-dimensional player. I don't think he's not gonna be like an impact. He's gonna be an impact player, but not like a huge star for that team. They also added Liam McNeely, who is a top 5 recruit. Their transfer moves really don't impress me at all. I think the Big East is getting significantly worse this year. Creighton not doing as well, Marquette not doing as well, a couple other teams that don't look as good this year. With the Big East not being well, and this UConn roster doesn't look as good as the past 2 years. Of course, Dan Hurley, I can't doubt him. He's an amazing coach. But with just not that much competition in conference play going into March Madness, which kind of helped them in the past years when the Big East was good. Now the Big East doesn't look as good. I don't see UConn, going deep in March, even making a three-peat.
Well, and Jack, I want to go back to your point. You talked about all these great teams and all these great players, but we really got to talk about who's going to go number one in the draft next year for the NBA. And yes, it's super early to say, but we have had one set of early games, right? It's kind of like preseason type beat for all these teams. Let's talk about, you go back to talking about Duke, let's talk about Cooper Flagg. He was outstanding in that game, 22 points, 2 rebounds, 6 assists, 4 blocks, right? That's stud numbers for a kid who's so young. But what I'm trying to say is, let's talk about Ace Bailey.
Yeah.
Ace Bailey was the same sort of hype as Cooper Flagg, maybe a little less, but he comes out for Rutgers, goes 25 points, 5 rebounds, 1 assist, 1 block. There might be a conversation come around draft time. Who's the number one if these guys keep playing at the level they're at? Is it Cooper? Is it Ace? Jack, you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, Flagg is just talented-wise, looks like he's better, but also Ace Bailey is talented like crazy. You also don't want to forget Dylan Harper on that same Rutgers team. He's very efficient with the ball, the brother of Ron Harper Jr., the son of Ron Harper. He looks very good in that Rutgers system, but I agree. I believe it's between Flagg and Bailey right now. It's just what the team want, kind of a smaller guy that's explosive. In Ace Bailey, you want that big guy. You got to see how Cooper Flagg plays. He's still only 17, though. That's what you get when you're drafting him.
All right, and with that, we're going to head to some NFL. We'll talk a little bit about wide receivers, and then wide receivers getting hurt, and then we'll give you a little bit of some fantasy advice. So let's start off with the wide receivers getting hurt. I'll talk about Brandon Ayuk tearing his ACL last week versus the Chiefs, possibly even more knee structural damage. And look, you hate to see it, but this is why guys hold out for their money. If you remember, he waited well into the offseason, right before training camp. Actually, right before the season started. Forget training camp. This guy was hardly there. 4 years, $120 million with 76 of that guaranteed, and that's exactly why. What is it, 5th or 6th game of the season, blows his knee out, it's not going to play, probably won't return until at least halfway through the next season. And if there's any sort of trend that'll tell you about how a wide receiver does after they tear their ACL, it's not nearly as good as they used to be. Obviously, Ayuk having a down year already, you can attribute that to him not maybe being locked in the offseason, maybe not having, the type of time to work with Brock Purdy in this offense, but whatever the case may be, it sucks to see something like that. And again, that's why receivers hold out. If you don't get that bag and you go out there and you hurt your knee, you're not going to get anywhere near the type of money that Ayuk got. So it's super unfortunate to see, but it's just kind of the nature of the game, and the Niners will have to keep going on. I'll touch on that a little bit more. Jason, what do you have?
Well, we got to talk about Chris Godwin, right?
Yeah.
Same sort of thing happens. We just talk about the plethora of injuries this year for receivers, period, right? We had Kupp sit out, Puka sit out, but I'm going to talk about, the guy I'm going to talk about is Chris Godwin, right? That game, you got to, as Todd Bowles, you got to think about who, yes, you got the onside kick, but you're 10 points out. Do you really want to have those stars out there and risk their health? You already lost Mike Evans, who re-aggravates that hamstring, and it has been playing great this season, right? And then you lose Chris Godwin. Right now, they're looking at, we've lost 2 of our top receivers for Baker. We had aspirations to go to the playoffs. We don't have a target, and we don't know when Mike Evans will be back. Mike Evans might not be back till week 12, 13, 14. Will that be enough for the team? Jack, give me one of the receivers.
Yeah, one of the receivers I like that you could pick up in fantasy right now, it's got to be Elijah Moore. Jameis Winston, I think, loves to throw the ball at QB. Now he's starting, Deshaun Watson out for QB for the rest of the season. You got Amari Cooper, who was traded to the Bills, so he's not in that Brown system anymore. He had 6 receptions, 41 yards. I would expect him to get featured more in the offense after that, got featured more. And last week, I could see Elijah Moore, who's barely rostered on fantasy teams right now. I could see him, if you want, get a pickup for one of those receivers that you lost.
All right, and I'm going to give you another player I think you should trade for, and that is George Pickens. Look, he's got a new quarterback running that system with Russell Wilson, and in his first game with Russ, he got 9 targets, snagged for 111 yards and a touchdown. He's a guy who, if he gets those wide receiver 1 looks like he's been begging for this entire time, he's going to produce. We've heard him time and time again trash on Kenny Pickett, even trash a little bit on Justin Fields, saying he's the number 1. Throw him the ball. He's going to produce. And now he's got a quarterback who fed him, like I said, 9 times, went for 5 receptions, 111 yards. This is a guy who, if you can pick up and Russ keeps throwing to him, I think it can be really beneficial to your fantasy team late in the season.
Well, and also, he is going up and getting that ball, right? Russ will put it somewhere where he can. He had a guy like Tyler Lockett where he knew where a guy could go and get that ball. If you looked at that Jets game, he was head-topping kids, taking the ball off their domes and giving it to them. So I'm going to talk about another receiver. Going back to Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, we're going to talk about a guy you can pick up. A guy you can pick up is McMillan, Jalen McMillan. He was great out of UW when they made that championship run. And with all these receivers depleted, Baker's going to have to throw to somebody. Cade Otton's targets are going to go up, but you have guys, Trey Palmer, Jalen McMillan. Those are the two guys. That's a guy you can pick up if he's available in your leagues.
Yeah, a guy I think you should trade for as well is Romeo Dobbs. He's actually only rostered in 68% of leagues, so actually if you could pick him up, you should. That should definitely be on your roster right now, but if you want to trade for him, I think he's starting to mesh well with Jordan Love in the past couple of weeks. He's showing to be the wide receiver 1 of that team. 19 points 2 weeks ago, 17 points last week. The Packers' passing stats and usage of passing the ball has increased a ton since Jordan Love came back from injury. I expect Dobbs to keep cooking. I think you can get him at a very low price right now.
And I'm going to give you another trade to give up. I'm going to give you actually two. I'm going to give you a safe option, which is Seattle Seahawks Tyler Lockett. DK Metcalf is going to be out for a little bit. We don't know what's up with that. The knee, the MCL, right? Week to week. Tyler's always going to get targets from Geno. They play the Bills, who have struggled to hold receivers, right? They have some decent corners, but they've struggled. And another trade I'm going to give you is you go out and trade for one of the Texans receivers, right? Whether it's Tank Dell, who's had some bad weeks, you can get him at a low price, or Stephon Diggs. And yes, Nico Collins is injured, but if you can wait and you have enough guys, you can buy low on Nico Collins, especially with the way the receiver market is right now. He's shown that he can be the wide receiver 1 no matter what every week. And if you can get him for super low, it's perfect.
Yeah, and then real quick, the last thing about receivers, I'm actually going to tell you 2 receivers you can pick up and probably aren't available, or they're probably available in your league. Call me a homer if you want. Jacob Cowing, Ricky Pearsall. Those are 2 guys you need to be looking at in your fantasy leagues. Hear me out here. Brock Purdy has nobody to throw to. His wide receiver 1 right now is Ricky Pearsall. His wide receiver 2 is going to be Jacob Cowing. His wide receiver 3 is going to be Chris Conley. You got to throw the ball to somebody. You can't run a ton, especially when Jordan Mason's AC joint isn't working real well. Those guys are going to have to get reps at wide receiver. And we saw what Cowing did running down the field, burning a guy on a streak. And Ricky Pearsall had, I think, 4 catches, had a little bit of production. I'm not saying these guys are going to light the world on fire. But if you guys put them in a flex spot or even just have them on the bench, perhaps something will happen. I think those are guys who are 100% going to be available in your leagues. And look, again, Brock Purdy has to throw to somebody, and those will be the guys out on the field for him. Now, let's get it to the World Series preview. They're actually going right now. Currently, I believe the New York Yankees are up 2-1 on the Dodgers. Jason, what are we thinking for the World Series?
Well, honestly, with this early score, Stanton got on the board, right? He had Soto get on base, and Stanton absolutely lit that ball up, gave up Flaherty, and kind of punched him out of the game. Flaherty went longer than a lot of the Dodgers starters this year, but came out of the game. And as we speak right now, the Yankees are trying to make it even farther. It's bases loaded, top of the 6th, 2 outs, right? If they can get this, it's going to be hard for that bullpen to hold on to a lead, and with the Dodgers offense slowing down.
Yeah, the thing between these 2 teams that you see so similar is their pitching rotations. It's so depleted on both sides, a couple injuries on both sides, but I could see the Yankees' rotation just being a little better in this series. But Dodgers, Dave Roberts knows how to work that bullpen. You saw him do it against the Mets last series in the bullpen games. You saw him do it against the Padres in that series. They know how to work that bullpen very well. But right now, Garrett Cole, he's 66 pitches through, 5 innings, only giving up 2 hits. He has to 1 run, but that was kind of a dinky sac fly. Garrett Cole's looking good, but watch out for the Dodgers. When they see a pitcher twice, they kill him the second time. You saw it against the Mets. You saw it against the Padres. Most recently, Sean Manaea. They saw him for the second time. Manaea carved him in Game 2. Game 6, they just killed Manaea in Game 6. Once they see a pitcher twice, it is game over for the Dodgers.
Yeah, I'm actually going to agree exactly with that point. That's what I was going to say. I think if this series probably will get into those later stages, I think the Dodgers are just going to end up being more clutch than the Yankees. And with all that firepower, especially, it's nice to see kind of a low-scoring game. The Dodgers did get out of that jam. It is 2-1 in the 6th. No runners scored with that bases loaded Alex Verdugo at bat. And look, I predicted this just a couple weeks ago. It wasn't the flashiest, wasn't the smartest prediction, but Dodgers-Yankees ends up being the World Series matchup. I think this will go late, and unfortunately, at least for me as a Giants fan, I think the Dodgers are probably going to end up getting it done.
And one thing to note is Aaron Judge this postseason, batting 147. He's over 3 on the day today. I mean, if the Yankees do but if they do lose this series to the Dodgers, that's got to be the note for the Yankees that you paid so much money for Aaron Judge. And he did have an amazing regular season. I mean, he's going to win MVP. But it just sucks that Aaron Judge is not playing to his standards in the postseason for the Yankees. And if you think, if they lose a series and he was playing to his standards, then you could take it on the head. But now it's tough to see for Aaron Judge, who just can't show up in the postseason.
Yeah, and with that, we're going to round the show out with a little bit of Group of 5 college football. The Boise State Broncos head to Allegiant Stadium to face the UNLV Rebels in what is probably a preview for this year's Mountain West title game. Jason, what do you got?
Well, this game is going to be happening at 7:30 right after this show. And honestly, UNLV has had a good rushing defense. Yes, giving up 100 yards a night, but I think Genty's just going to eat, right?
Yeah,
and he can't have a bad game. I look at the rest of the schedule. He can't have a bad game if he has Heisman aspirations. It's going to be that last bowl game of the season if he can really, because I want to go out there and I want to see somebody that's not a quarterback go out there and win. I don't know about you guys. We've seen a receiver. I want to see a running back. I want to see a cowbell who gets the ball, gets the rock, and I don't care what Travis Hunter says. Travis Hunter's being a little child on social media talking about how, if I got my targets all game, it doesn't matter. If you wanted that, go talk to Deion Sanders, who has been your God-sent child. Get the ball. Ashton Genty, that's my Heisman.
Yeah, for me in this game, I think Ashton Genty has showed up in every big game. That was a question: is he going to show up in the big game against Oregon? He showed up. I know they lost, but as a player, he showed up against Oregon. And if you're Wazoo, you're sitting at home, you are praying UNLV wins this game, so then you can actually have a shot to try and win the Group of 5.
Yeah, and with that, I think this show is over. Thank you guys again so much for listening here in the Bill Austin Radio Studio. I'm Will Anderson.
Jack Kemler.
Jason Teeter.
Thank you again listening to the Bottom of the Sixth. Have a safe and fun weekend. Watch some football. Watch some World Series baseball. Watch some USC. And we'll catch you guys next week in the next one.
Peace.